Well, we're back with another book review. Actually, it's more like a writer's review, given that I read more than one of Mandi Lynn's books, but you know what, whatever. I think I first read Essence back in 2018 after hearing so much about it, and actually, I didn't hate it. The prose were flowery, but I was still into that at the time. The concept was a little thin, but the plot was interesting enough. I read through the story pretty quickly. It started out as a good time. A little halfway through, though, I could tell something was missing. Something just wasn't adding up, and making a review complaining about the usual flat characters or inefficient world building just wasn't gonna cut it. So I shelved the idea until last year. Before we get started, I would like to briefly introduce myself to new viewers and explain a little bit more about the book for those who aren't familiar with the AuthorTube community. My name is Nicole. I make YouTube videos. Some are good, others are bad enough to make me rethink my life choices, but it's all in fun. AuthorTube is this online community on the internet's and YouTube sphere where a bunch of writers get together to discuss their writing, their books, or just themselves. I'm of the belief that writers are capable of more than just talk. We can do things, and we can do great things if we put our minds to it. But sometimes we get caught up in our own ideas of grandeur and greatness long before we've learned what we need to pass that greatness down for others to find their way. It's all a part of the lesson. You know, the journey in life is to eat enough humble pie that we eventually realize we never knew anything at all, and we're all just kind of winging it. Which is what it felt like to read this book. The advice one finds on AuthorTube is good for the newbie, the beginner. The intermediate and masters aren't really a part of the community, and this has bred another group of skeptics due to the lack of knowledge and depth these commentaries have to offer. Where's the insight? Where's the context? Do we only really care about the fun parts of the story, or do we actually know how to tell a good story? Are we just content plodding along as writers, or do any of us actually want to become great at what we do? Or, you know, good enough at least to compete against centuries worth of experience that traditional publishing has to look up to. Because most AuthorTubers on here are indie published, or as you might have heard the term, self-published. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the debate between the two spheres is ongoing. People seem to believe self-published books are the result of too many rejections from the gatekeeping traditionally published world, and it's used as a last resort. Others, like myself, see self-publishing as the freest form of publication that still allows writing to be what it started out in its natural state, a form of art, inspiration, unfiltered, unfettered, au naturel. And in a world of fakey fakeness everywhere today, there are plenty of readers out there who support indie writing as a means to maintain authenticity and true expression of what a writer feels. Not to mention the things people want to read that traditional publishing can't really get away with, or they don't think they can get away with, and make money while doing it. There's a lot of reasons we have these stigmas. There are plenty of writers on here who don't hire a cover designer or an editor. Wait, this was edited? She paid how much? Anyway, I don't think writing should be this thing that fits in where it's supposed to be. We color outside the lines once in a while, and I don't personally have a problem with that. A lot of people in the community don't have a problem with that. The problem stems from posing as professionals when we're still inexperienced or starting out. A lot of writers on here started their YouTube channel to gain viewership and traction for sales by giving writing advice, which, if you're a writer, it's valid, it's allowed, but then the books come out, usually advertised as debut, and questions are asked. So I'm here to try to answer the main one. Why do they all suck? Thing is, we all start out thinking our books are great. Or if you're a poet or screenwriter, you know, we all think it's the shit until someone comes along to say otherwise. There is a way to train ourselves to write the way others will love our works, but those teachings aren't really found on YouTube. Everything developmental is missing because the writers started out too fast, too soon, and they're just learning as they go.
Hey, we all!
Thing is, there's nothing wrong with that. In an age of perfectionism and aesthetic and ChatGPT, we're expected to start out as professionals. So I certainly understand the stigma and the struggle to market in order to get ahead. Brushing off the naysayers is necessary to push through the negativity, because once we get started, we kind of have to keep chugging along, continue pretending that we've got it all figured out. Mandi Lynn released her debut novel Essence at the age of 17. After attempting to get traditionally published, she decided to self-publish, format her own books, designed her own cover. She even created a book promo. And she didn't just write and publish the book. This little go-getter started writing workshops for other teen authors, started a YouTube channel, and even had an interview on local television. She put in the work, and she helped a lot of writers get ahead, and this is where her reputation stands. She's gone into business for herself, created her own LLC under Stone Ridge Books, and her website boasts many courses on creating book covers, formatting, and she even launched a nonfiction series on marketing by
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
There is definitely a market for self-publishing first-timers who don't know where to start, they don't know what the options are, and as far as marketing goes, Mandi Lynn is it. It's the reason she's such a well-known face of the community, and she's been consistent with this for a long time. She may have started out giving writing advice on her channel, but I think she eventually steered clear to this because, well, for the same reasons other writers are clearing their cache of rehashed writing tips and tricks. They're being called out. Now, I know this isn't what any newbie wants to hear, but the most effective way to learn is from our mistakes. The biggest mistake that has been made on AuthorTube is debut authors giving writing advice before publishing their first book because it sets the wrong expectations, has a negative impact on the reputation, and gives the writer really no real room to grow and make those mistakes without having thousands of pairs of eyes on them to watch it happen. And that's kind of the chokehold I think we want to steer clear of. Discussions turn from haters and naysayers and preferences to very real reasons more experienced readers and writers have for why people should not buy your book. But we're not here to listen to me rant about AuthorTube. Not that I haven't done that in several videos prior. Today's focus is on Essence, so let's get into it. And for those of you who haven't read it, here's a brief synopsis. The prologue opens with this half-death experience she doesn't remember when she's a baby, where her soul apparently splits in two. Emma and her family moved to New Hampshire from Florida due to her mom's work. Now, I know what you're thinking. She's going to be that angsty teenager who's bitter at her parents for moving away from school and friends and yeah. No, not here. She's not happy about being here, but she doesn't seem to go up against anyone or anything to challenge them. Now, a sure way to make your book boring is to make everything easy. There is such a thing as having a good relationship with your parents. I understand and respect that. But in the beginning of a story, we're still being introduced to your character. We want to know how she thinks, what makes her tick, and the only way to do that is to challenge them. Spur them to action to see what choices they would make, or challenge their ideology to see where they might need to grow. But everything in the beginning of this book is too easy. She gets along with her parents. She is nervous about school, but makes friends right away. I'd say the scene placement was fine, but nothing happens except for this curious mist and voice she hears calling her to the woods. The woods in this instance would be sort of the catalyst. It is an unchanging force we are being introduced to in the beginning, taunting the reader through use of intrigue and mystery, and we know subconsciously and just from pure repetition and media entertainment that this voice, these woods, are going to present the turning point for our MC. What we need before we get there is to find out who Emma is first. Who is she now? What does she believe? Is she happy about the move? Is she angry at her parents? Does she miss her friends? Does she feel like she belonged where she was, or is she feeling that now? Before we even ask the question, will she ignore her inner voice to follow the voice in the woods, we need to find out what her inner voice is saying. Is she impulsive or is she logical? This would also help heighten the intrigue behind the woods, not just what is there yet to be discovered, but is this a natural pull, an instinctive one, or is it possessive? Another voice and another mist is introduced, which, in my opinion, presents the second mistake. The orange mist shouldn't be there. The voice telling her not to go into the woods should not be another external force. We already have one challenging her instincts. Her inner voice should be at war with this external one because, again, we're learning who this MC is and what it will take to get her into these woods to betray her instincts or her logic and follow. In my personal opinion, cliche as it might sound, there should have been conflict to pressure her enough in the external world that she's living in, but there's no real motive or reason for her to go into those woods. She goes in anyway. Despite her life being relatively normal, she's kind of just possessed into being pulled into these woods, called to a lagoon, and mesmerized into picking up this silvery stone from the water, and then she blacks out. When she does wake up, she's surrounded by all these strangers she doesn't know, including a girl who voiced the orange mist, trying to warn her not to come here, not to pick up the stone, because now she's stuck here. She's not really alive, not really a ghost. She's just trapped in this place called Phantom Lagoon. The orange mist was voiced by this girl named Eliza, who had tracked her down in school to keep an eye on her. Is Eliza the other half of her soul? Has she been trapped here the whole time, and now the conflict to resolve is figuring out the secret to the lagoon to connect the soul to being one again? Nope. No, we don't ever meet the other half of Emma's soul. Eliza and Emma could have made this great bond, determined to get back or move forward, maybe have a self-sacrificing moment for one another to reconnect. There was a lot of potential here for where the story could have gone, and honestly, the moment she wakes up is the height of intrigue. But it just stops there. The story completely freezes. This isn't the end. I mean, we've still got another 250 pages left to go, but this book ends at the beginning of Act 2 because instead of facing a new challenge, our main character just gives up. The lagoon is no longer a turning point, but a cross for our main character to bear the burden and accept her fate. She's no longer the protagonist, but simply a victim, a martyr. This is what happens when you create a character by circumstance. Rather than having your character decide who they will be through the choices they make, even the passive ones, this character is a cardboard cutout with a mindset that when bad things happen, there's nothing you can do about it. Now, this was the resistance that Emma needed to come against for us to journey with her into discovering what she needed to resolve the conflict in her physical world. That's the whole point of a story, a character-centric one at that. But when Emma is told there is nothing to be done and she is neither living nor dead and she's just stuck here, she doesn't fight it. She doesn't determine to go back. She doesn't determine to go forward. She cries, she mopes, and she feels sorry for herself. There is stuff that happens throughout the rest of the book. Her mom can see her, and at first I thought she was going to try to reconnect and find a way back. But the rest of their relationship is really just helping her mom pack up Emma's stuff and put it in the attic. Like she's just gone, and her mom accepts it and she accepts it, and it is the way that it is. And then later on in the book, she moves her corpse-ish body for the cops to find so her parents can just accept her death and move on. Other random stuff happens, like they accidentally lure a 3 or 4-year-old girl to the lagoon who shares the same fate, and their brainwashing tactic for her is to convince her she's an angel. And then later on, they just tell her the truth anyway, even though the poor thing's mind will never progress beyond 3 or 4. They still decide to tell her just straight up, you're dead. Then there's this weird magician guy who brings up what I assume to be the theme of the book. Sometimes you have to lose yourself to find yourself. Apparently that was supposed to be lost in the subtext in here, but you can't have subtext without context, so you know what, it doesn't work. And without the journey, the weight of the sentiment is lost because this paper mache character can't hold water to save her life. It doesn't matter how lost she gets if she just gives up. And she seems to think she is as incapable of change as her circumstances. This magician guy really should have been the down moment, that moment of clarity that a character gets before they finally have their eureka moment and push through the final hurdle to figure out what they need in order to get back, how to change, what needs to happen to bring about the end result. This whole book is a down moment, so it just sticks out like a sore thumb. And then at the end, we have Emma sorta kinda reunite with her dying mother, and they just ascend to the spiritual beyond together at random. Nothing is really resolved because there's no conflict to begin with, so everything just feels flat. I also tried reading the sequel to Essence, I Am Mercy, and I just ended up being more confused. All it did was solidify my reasonings for why this form of storytelling doesn't work. Your main character needs a goal. Now, you could be saying, well, characters don't always have to have a goal. There is such a thing as flat characters or simply changes that happen that still make up a story. This is not one of those, and I'm going to explain why. Stories that exhibit flat characters are usually created to lend insight for the viewer. Those types of characters don't have that much to change in themselves because they bring about the change in the world around them. We can see how their presence puts to perspective the changes that can happen within those around them simply by being exposed to new and different beliefs. Other more passive characters can absolutely have an arc even in the last act of a book or movie after having remained consistent in their behaviors by recognizing how their actions have affected others around them.
Please, God, let me live again.
But in essence, the character is neither changed from within, changing their circumstances, or having any real impact on those around her. The reason why these prior examples work is because the changes happen with us, the viewer, and our perspective. As soon as Emma gets to the lagoon, she accepts her fate without any real fight or argument. There is little to no insight being offered because we, the readers, are offered nothing to witness. Nothing to prove any of her ideologies are changing or the effect that her being in the lagoon has really changed others. Things happen, and changes even happen, but they are pulled out of thin air and have no lasting effect on anyone or anything that happens in the book. There is absolutely no point to a character-centric story without the journey. There's no reason for her to be here, and we the readers are told to accept our fate when the main character decides to immediately just accept hers. Robert McKee writes on page 107 in his book Character, The Art of Role and Cast Design for Page, Stage, and Screen. What a character chooses to do in his lightest moments expresses little because they cost him little, but at his darkest, when he's up against the powerful, negative forces, when risks are greatest, his actions reveal the truth. Who is he? As soon as Emma is brought to the lagoon, she is met with her first resistance. This is the crossroads where a choice has to be made. Even if the question isn't in the text, it is still present with us readers. What do they do now? and the defining moment, not just for your character, but it sets the whole precedent for the rest of your story. The whole plot in a character-centric story is to watch for change. Every human being is born with a collection of drivers for survival, love, meaning, and more. These hungers are subconscious and unfocused. Like winds billowing on a ship's sails, they push from behind and urge a character forward. A motivation, therefore, is an unsated appetite. We were robbed of that the moment Emma decided to just accept things as they are. In an unchanging world with an unchanging character, you get a boring story and bad reviews. Without a motive, the story turns dull and lifeless, the characters wandering as ghosts in our imagination as much as they might be in the story, devoid of any meaning that can't be brought back to life with any number of prose or perfect writing. The answer to fixing this is so simple, it makes me angry that she paid nearly $800 for a structural editor. Her character simply needed a goal. She needed to figure out a way to get out of the lagoon instead of just accepting her fate. That's it. It wouldn't have fixed every problem in this book, but would have kept the story going. This story had so much potential to be so much more. Whether or not it would have pleased all the haters, it would have at the very least been true to itself and the form it clearly wanted to take on. The first question would have been, what will they do? The second question readers ask is, will they reach their goal? The only thing keeping readers reading is a curiosity, and that curiosity is only born out of a question. Writers have this itch to steer clear of predictability and cliches, but sometimes these are useful tools that can benefit your writing. While it might feel cliche that she's a ghost simply trying to return home, this book was also written around the same time movies like The Invisible and The Lovely Bones were at a height. This would have been peak for grabbing at the audience already interested in this type of storytelling. Now, I'm not all for following the trends, but if you're already writing something that's trending, then it might be a good chance to gain traction and stand apart when people are already looking for similar works. Essence could have been that story about reconnecting with loved ones, her need to reconnect with her mother. Maybe she's mad that her mother moved them all the way from Florida, away from her friends just for work. Maybe her mother doesn't understand her desires to be an artist. This is the conflict, and the resolution would have been witnessed at the end of the book. Of course, we have a whole middle part of the book that most writers fear, but I think this is just because it's where the bulk of our work is really done. A middle that is sagging is a journey without a need, without a direction. Without the wind in our sails, we are floating, hoping for the next slightest breeze to inch us closer to our destination. Emma would have to first reveal the mystery of the lagoon, every new insight exciting her more and causing her to feel like she's getting closer to her goal. But the more she learns, the more she realizes she's missing a vital piece, her piece. And the theme of sometimes you have to lose yourself to find yourself becomes evident in the subtext of the work as the character realizes she understood less about family or less about herself. This would have been the Eliza realization. Eliza could have been the key, her other half, and the other piece of her soul that she lost in the beginning, and the moment of clarity hits. The middle part of the book is really where we should have learned about the others that were trapped in the lagoon. The other character stories, their centuries worth of lessons they did not learn and souls that did not reconnect simply because they were the ones to give up. That's why they're trapped. But if Emma had pushed and fought, it would have spoken volumes about her character. Despite her differences with her mother, she still wants to go home. The result, of course, would have been delayed by a moment of reckoning. Maybe her ideas of leaving the lagoon are brought to question by an event or another character that causes her to feel like her efforts are in vain and she should just give up and accept her fate like the rest of them. Or the mysteries of the lagoon really could have just been the lesson itself. Instead of the lagoon taking, it gives the characters a chance to go beyond the physical world to discover what they need to in order to make changes that will manifest in the physical world. Every character that's trapped feels it is a dark force when in reality it is born of light. And only the characters who truly believe in change and creating better circumstances through effort or a change in perspective gives them the ability to return. I don't know. There's a million and one ways the story could have gone. The potential was just dropped at the end of the first act, and it's sad to see. While these characters might not choose to go down a path, their reasoning behind the lack of motivation is due to their mindset. These are characters born of circumstance rather than personal choice. Even in stories with flat characters or characters who make the smallest of decisions, the repercussions and lasting effects are so massive that it causes us, the reader, to reflect on how our own choices can make bigger and lasting impacts on those around us. But both characters in these books simply accept their fate as if their entire identity hinges on what happens to them rather than defining themselves. And the argument could simply be, well, they fought to survive those circumstances. that was the journey. But they didn't. You can absolutely have a character fighting through something, but if they're not fighting for anything, then the fight is devoid of any meaning and is simply a fight. Telling a story is more than just stuff happens to character A and these things happen as a result. Characterization is only revealed through the choices that are made throughout the story. This is the showing and not telling portion that we writers talk about. Maybe they make consistent choices up until something causes them to reflect and switch it up, creating a whole new character by the end of the story. Maybe their choices have an effect on others around them, or it changed the perspective in the viewers who've only ever really chosen a certain way. But having a character choose nothing is like putting out a sailboat without those sails. Even with the wind, there's nowhere to go. To Mandi's credit, I did start reading some of her newer works, and it does improve. As hard as Mandi worked to advertise herself and push Essence and I Am Mercy, it just felt so premature that I think the interest died off along the way. Her later books might not be my forte, but they're definitely for someone. They're just simple, cute romances for the outdoorsy people, very fluffy and light fiction that should be advertised. I think Mandi is capable of a lot with her writing. She's just still learning. She has ideas, and her passion does show even in her earlier works how badly she wants to connect to readers through complex characters. She just needs to practice with the building blocks a little bit, that's all. But this is a primary example of why advertising as a professional right off the bat might not be the best route. It might get you sales, but too much attention too fast, and especially at the wrong time, can have a negative impact on your reputation, not to mention your mental health. You can't please everybody, and I think that's one of the hardest things for us to accept, not just in writing, but in general. There will always be something that you missed, some way you could have made it better in someone else's eyes. She has a real drive and a real ambition, and she could go really far. I think she already has. I mean, she started her own business. Essence is already written, but there are plenty of other stories to tell and other ways to experiment and make them better than before. I don't think we should hold ourselves back as much as we do to try to be perfect or fit in, and we shouldn't expect ourselves to have it all figured out from the get-go. Allow yourself to make mistakes. Allow yourself to learn. The only thing I would suggest to minimize damage would be to try to be private or small when you know you've got a ways to go. Anyway, that's it for today. I have other reviews to do, other books to read. Thank you all for watching. Like and subscribe, comment below if you feel like talking, and I hope to see you guys in my next video.